couldn't care less about the race of fourth, mate. What I care about is the way the team's sort of progressing. Pleased with today. Had a little bit of everything for us. Started the game well. Not just the goal. I thought we controlled the game really well. Then obviously, conceded from a counter attack, which was disappointing. But I thought we lost our way a little bit towards the back end of that first half. But super reaction, and I thought the whole second half were really dominant. Played some good football, scored a couple of good goals. Probably could have had a couple more against a team that was very, very, desperate for points and fighting for everything. Which I guess every team's fighting for something. I thought we handled it really well.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. This is episode 173. We've got a fun one and a packed show this afternoon. Start by throwing it out to Caroline. She's at CG Stefco. Caroline, how are you on this fine Sunday?
Doing pretty good. It's always nice after a win, and it's been a pretty chill weekend otherwise. I've not been quite as locked into the NCAA stuff as y'all, but still enjoying some other sports. Lots of USL soccer. So,
no question. That is why we are doing the pod a little bit later. Scott and I know for sure wanted to sit and watch the women's national championship game, which went to South Carolina, much to Scott's chagrin, being an Iowa man himself. Scott, he is at Scotchy Bird. Scott, what's going on, man?
Yeah, like you said, tough result for the Hawkeyes today. I am sitting in Iowa as we record, and the state was pretty revved up. But congrats to South Carolina and South Carolina Spurs. Good group down there. I'm sure they're thrilled. And buddy of mine from Seattle Spurs, Ricky, got to shout him out. He's thrilled. He went to USC, so well played. But Tottenham pod, right? Not an NCAA March Madness pod. So I will say also a wonderful day as a Spurs fan. Great result this morning. Of course, we're happy to be here to talk about it. But, hope everybody enjoyed their Sunday. Let's rip into it.
We are going to rip into, as you say, that Tottenham Hotspur victory over Nottingham Forest, a 3-1 result this morning at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But first, we did not talk about a midweek match, which has been rare for Spurs this year. They have not had a lot of these midweek contests, but they took a trip over to the London Stadium earlier this week that was on Tuesday. Am I correct in that? A Tuesday match? I don't even remember at this point, but a 1-1 result against West Ham United, 2 goals within the first 20 minutes of this one. And this was a weird match. I'm just gonna straight up say it. It was not a match I ever felt comfortable about. It never is with West Ham for some odd reason, but Brennan Johnson gets a goal very, very early on in this one in the 5th minute on an assist from Timo Werner. Kurt Zuma comes back with a goal in the 19th minute. And then from there, it was kind of a bland match, to be perfectly honest. There wasn't much to it. I thought Spurs played pretty well, if all things considered, but they just couldn't get a whole hell of a lot going. And there were some changes from the prior match against Luton into this when we saw the return of Mickey van de Ven to the lineup. We also saw Rodrigo Bentancur get a start, which I thought was an interesting decision. And then Dejan Kulusevski was not in the lineup. It was the wingers I've already mentioned. It was Brennan Johnson and Timo Werner flanking Heung-min Son. Caroline, what was your kind of just overall reaction to this result, the 1-1? I guess a point never bad on the road, but it's West Ham, so it feels a little bit icky, I guess, to some extent. But what are your thoughts on just this match from a 3,000-foot view?
Well, I was joking right before we started recording, asking, do we have to talk about this game? It was a bit of a painful watch from my perspective, especially that scoreless second half. Just really felt like it dragged on and on. And it didn't look very fun to play in either because of the weather, the rain conditions. But I don't think it's the worst results. I feel like there was quite a bit of negativity in the fan base afterwards. But to me, it's like, it's West Ham. We play weird games against them all the time. And a point away from home, really not the worst thing in context, especially considering Aston Villa had dropped points that weekend, midweek, I guess. So it wasn't the worst thing. And I think we just saw the set piece defense woes coming back to bite us again. And it is disheartening to me that we cannot keep a clean sheet to save our life. But I don't think it was a terrible game at the same time.
I want to come back to the set piece stuff in a moment, but Scott, I know your big kind of issue with this was once again the midfield, a topic that you love to discuss. The midfield, there was not a lot of offensive firepower coming from the center of the pitch. It was all coming from the wings, and obviously the Timo Werner Brennan Johnson connection has been a good one. Like these are two players that have given Spurs what they've gotten offensively over the last handful of weeks, but not enough of it is coming from the midfield. What do you see in this midfield and just kind of what it's not doing? And then we'll talk about how it progressed against Forest today, but specifically for West Ham, what did you see in the midfield?
Well, first we start by saying it was Basuma and Sarr as the double pivot, if you want to call it that. It doesn't tactically end up being that under Ange, but either way, I think what I'm seeing is it's a pulley string, right? And everything's attached to one another, and Basuma's not absorbing pressure and beating players off the dribble like he was doing so well in the beginning of the season, which affords Sarr less space to get open in the middle of the park. So Sarr has to find opportunities to get on the ball on the flanks, which Sarr really only touches the ball out wide right now. Did Sarr not start against West Ham?
No, Bentancur started. That's why I was like flagging you down. It was not Sarr.
Thank you. Yeah, to the listeners, my apologies. But yeah, Bentancur started with Basuma, but I think it's the same point, right? That when your six isn't absorbing pressure and getting out of that pressure, like he was phenomenal at that at the beginning of the season, right? It was something that as a fan, you start to think, how long can he sustain this ability to do that, right? It's not happening now, but when it's not happening again, it leaves a Bentancur in this situation, forced to go wide to receive the ball, and that just disjoints our play through the middle, because you guys have heard me in the chat nonstop, and I'm sure you're sick and tired of it, but just I'm groaning and groaning about the fact that we can't do anything through the middle. We can't create chances through the middle. We can't hold the ball through the middle. The only space we can find is behind the fullbacks, which is great it's great in practice, but when it's your only method of attack, it gets stale, right? And I think that did happen against West Ham. But ultimately, the midfield's got to get things sorted out. We've got to be able to progress the ball up the middle. We've got to be able to hold the ball through the middle and not need to release the pressure out wide, because the ball doesn't get back to the middle, or when it does, you're no longer ahead of the play, right? By the time it gets back to the middle, you're faced with a brick wall in front of you from a defensive standpoint. So again, until that gets fixed, we're not going to see a ton of opportunities through the middle. And because of that, we're not going to see anything other than these 1-1 draws or late wins that we've been required to find, bar today, right, which we'll get to. So
when I look back on my notes that I took during this West Ham match, I thought that Basuma had been a little bit better than he was in recent weeks, just from a standpoint of protecting the center backs and recycling the ball. I thought the real issue I saw was Bentancur and some of his decision making, some of his passing. It wasn't also great from either of the fullbacks, I thought, in terms of, and we know with the inverted fullbacks, they're going to play more of a midfield role than ever in an Ange system. And I didn't think either of them were very remarkable in this match. I thought Madison was showing a little bit more, but then was subbed off after 70 minutes. And it still seemed disjointed to me in the midfield. And obviously you get the goal. And then I do want to talk about the set piece defense too, because this was something that we saw a lot in the Everton match earlier in the season. We saw it I think again in the previous match against Manchester City, is this crowding of Vicario in the box and not giving him, not that he's entitled to it, but not giving him space to operate around corners. And I just feel like there's no ability for our defenders to get in there. Not that there's no ability, but they haven't been doing it. They haven't shown the ability to get in there and defend their goalkeeper and allow him the freedom to move to the ball on set pieces. And I don't know, Caroline, what have you seen with that? Because it's been really frustrating to me to just watch Vicario I don't want to say get bullied because he is making athletic plays, but this Zuma goal was one that I just really felt like was very preventable.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that they're not trying to protect Vicario, because I feel like that is what's been happening. We're so preoccupied with, trying to help him get some space on these set pieces, and then we leave a player completely unmarked, inside the box, like we had with Zuma in this game. I can't remember who it was a couple games ago. It was almost an identical situation. So it's tough because it seems like this is something we kind of have to do because the officials have not been very good about actually protecting the goalkeeper as they seem to do in most other games. So that's frustrating, but we've got to find some sort of solution because we can't have everybody concentrated on that and then just completely leaving players unmarked. Also, the way he scored was like basically with his back. It wasn't even like a good shot or anything. So that just felt, like I said at the beginning, kind of one of those weird West Ham game things that just seem to happen. But I feel very frustrated with the way we've been defending set pieces in general. Like not just corners, it's the free kicks too. We've even been caught out a few times by like long throw-ins. So they've got to bring somebody else in the summer to sort of take over that coaching role, I think, because how do you say his name? Mile Jedinak is just not getting it done.
Well, and I've seen a ton of people giving Ryan Mason a bunch of stick, but Ryan Mason doesn't deal with the defensive set pieces. He deals with the offensive set pieces. So it's similar to when Gianni Vio was on board with the club. People were giving him stick about the defensive side when he's just working on the attacking set pieces. So Scott, what else can we do about these set pieces, man? Do you got any solutions for us?
No, nothing that's legal in the eyes of the referees, but no, honestly, I don't think there's much you can do outside of the one thing that you can and need to do, and that's bring in a set piece specialist. I think I'm not Ange Postecoglou. I never will be, right? I can't tie that man's shoes, but I think it's pretty obvious that something has to change from a set piece perspective. I don't see why it would be perceived as viable to come in and just give two of your coaches like, all right, you're going to be in charge of offensive set pieces and you in charge of defensive. Like, sure, they were professional players, talented professional players who understand the game, but they have more to focus on than just set pieces as coaches, right? So it's a little bit weird to me, a little bit iffy. Again, no shot at Ange Postecoglou, but it's been reported he doesn't see it necessary, and I guess maybe that's the one decision of Ange's I would have ever have questioned at this point in his tenure.
I do want to move on from West Ham because it's West Ham, and I don't like talking about them. I don't like talking about draws. It's the whole kissing your sister thing. Whatever. It was a weird. It was a weird game. I will just say the last note I had is seeing the bubbles is never not funny to me. It is so amateurish and silly, but it does make me laugh. So I do appreciate a game at West Ham for that reason alone. Like even coming out at halftime, the bubble machine was pumping out some bubbles and it was like really, really comical. So I do appreciate that part of it. And just, I appreciate West Ham allowing me to giggle at them once a season for that purpose and that purpose alone.
Well, hey, I hate to follow up quick with with your humorous take on West Ham, but I do gotta give them a little bit of credit too before we moved on. And maybe this makes me feel better about the point, right? But they're a good team. Jared Bowen looks fantastic. I think he's slated for a spot to France this year with England. And credit to him. You've got Kudus and Paquetá, who are both fantastic. They put us under a lot of pressure out the back in a way that Forest didn't today. And I think we can talk more about that when we get to the PEH of all of this, right? But West Ham was really, really good. They're a team on the rise, and I don't sense that going away anytime soon. So I do think we have to give them a little bit of credit as well.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying there. I mean, West Ham, look, I'll throw this
It's
at
West
you.
Ham, right? I know, I get it.
Well, no, I'm going to throw this to you. I know how much you love XG. West Ham had almost more than a half goal XG than us in this game. despite only having 32% of possession. So like they made the most of their opportunities, and obviously came through with a point, which is good for them. It's just not good for Spurs.
Sure.
Let's talk about Nottingham Forest, because this was better, I thought, from Spurs, and obviously lesser opposition, but doesn't matter. It's a Premier League game. You got to do what you got to do. Once again, the first goal though comes from just the wings. It's the wings. Timo. This lineup is also extremely similar. The only real difference, Sarr comes in for Bentancur in this match in the midfield, but Van de Ven stays on, and the wings stay Brennan Johnson, Timo Werner, and Timo Werner gets the quote unquote assist for the first goal, which ends up being an own goal. And it's something that we've seen a lot from this team in recent weeks, and especially since Timo Werner has joined the club in January. He continues to contribute in this way. A really good start for Spurs, getting that goal, and then they give one up on the counter. And I'm actually way less bothered by this conceded goal than I was the one against West Ham. You're going to, if you play the way Spurs do, give up goals on the counter attack like Spurs did today. The benefit of it is they went and scored 2 more after it. And that's where you have to be encouraged by the performance, because in this way that Spurs are playing, Caroline, it's go, go, go. You have to expect to win more games 3 and 4-1 than 1-0.
Yeah, I think it was a little funny that the game-winning goals came from defenders. We weren't really expecting that, but I think it speaks to the fact that we identified the problem of having way too much of our production coming solely from the wings. And we did see that a little bit at the beginning of this game. It was starting to feel stagnant again in the first half. And I think Andrew's really smart to once again make that halftime substitution, swap out, a couple players from the midfield, and bring in some new ideas. And I felt like after that point, we really started to get more opportunities, like on the edge of the box, inside the box. Son, he didn't get on the score sheet except for, I think he had an assist actually.
He assisted Van de Ven's goal.
Yeah, it just felt like he was a lot more active within the box, like trying to, open up some space, find those like really short distance type passes. And, we capitalized on a couple of those shots, and that made the difference in the end. But I think we still, we need to be focused on creating more of those opportunities and, actually taking the shots. Because I feel like in games past, there were times when we were just being way too finicky about like setting up the perfect angle, perfect shot, and then not taking the ones that were like those, quote unquote half chances, which in this case, led to goals. So I'm glad that they at least took some of those opportunities today.
That was the other big part of my notes that I had was shots, and we can do the whole bit now. Shot. Yeah. There were so many shots taken, especially in the first half of this game, and they were taken, a lot of them from outside the box. And it was something that Ange was asked about earlier in the week, but a lot of these shots we saw from players like Basuma or there were a couple of other ones that were just like kind of random half chance shots. But I liked that in the first half. I liked taking a few pops at goal, even if they were half chances or less than half chances. And I was in favor of that. I feel like Spurs are a team that if they can get themselves up around 20 to 25 shots in a given game. Now, they only ended up with 17 in this match here today, but if they can get themselves up around that 20 to 25 shot range, I think that's a good thing. Scott, where are you at with just like getting the ball toward the goal more often and seeing if maybe some good shit will happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that partly goes into what I was rambling and ranting about earlier in us not doing anything through the middle. I think one of the ways you start to find opportunities through the middle is to shoot, because we have, as you just mentioned earlier, 78% of the ball every game, right? So at some point, you're just going to have to take a rip. Do I want Basuma being the guy to step up and take a rip? I'm not quite sure, right? But I do like the shot selection today. And I do think it favored the problem that we've been working to alleviate for a while. I would imagine it's like a month now.
Caroline made the point too about the substitutions. I thought these were really interesting substitutions because I saw a lot of people calling for Madison to come off for like either Kulusevski or Lo Celso, but instead it was both Basuma and Sarr that came off for Højbjerg and Bentancur. And Scott, you said you wanted to talk about Højbjerg. Like I think both of them did change the game in a really interesting way. It like Caroline said, it was like a different flavor in the midfield and a different combination of things that worked out for Spurs in the second half. But I also do think, again, to the point Caroline made, Sonny was dropping a little bit too and showing almost like a secondary option for Madison and allowing other players to dart into the box and make things happen as well.
Yeah, and I think we used to see that in the beginning of the season too, with Son and Madison really working together within the box. So that was nice to see again. And I also think got to give some credit to Højbjerg, because I thought he had a pretty great game, except for that one terrifying hospital pass moment, which was, that's the struggle.
He does it.
With him,
yeah, he's got one of those. He's got one or two of those a game. Yeah, it's always going to happen. You got to live through it. But yes.
Yeah, but otherwise, I felt like he was really integral to the turnaround in the second half. And, I saw a lot of chatter online about the fact that he's probably going to be on the way out this summer just because of like age and sort of system fit. But I think he does deserve some credit for sort of adapting his game a little bit this season to like still be able to contribute, even though we know he's obviously not like a long-term fit necessarily for what Ange wants to do.
It's really interesting you bring him up. I heard it so on the broadcast over here in the States, they talked about when he came on the pitch at halftime. This is a guy that has been a really good player for Denmark, has captained Denmark, has kind of put his head down and been really professional. It's all the same things I've been saying all season. I think Højbjerg's been very professional. He had the comments a few weeks ago where he said, of course, he's not happy about his playing time or lack thereof this season, but he's still been just a professional about it. And I respect the hell out of it. And I respect the hell out of the job he's done, even if he's not the perfect fit for what Spurs are trying to do right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I think you can almost see an Ange and a PH conversation go something along the lines of, I want more playing time. As you heard in the press, I want more playing time and I'm not happy about it. And Ange says, perfect, mate. Show me you want to play in training. And PH says, got it, Roger that, right? And he goes and works his butt off, and he earned himself some minutes today, and it paid off. I think the one thing that I was maybe alluding to earlier is I do think Nottingham Forest afforded us a little more space and time and breathing room out of the back than, say, a West Ham did, who really suffocated those back three, if you call it Basuma and the two center backs, right, with the ball. So I still don't know if he's as effective against a different team, right? Who knows? I think we need to invest in the six, as you guys were just talking about. He's probably leaving for that reason, right? Because we need to invest in a six, and someone has to push Basuma and maybe surpass him, right? But yeah, again, can't take anything away from him because he came on and he changed the game today. His passing was really progressive. I think he gave Bentancur a good opportunity to get a little bit more involved going forward, which he can do really well, right? When I think someone is playing effectively as a six behind him. Yeah, PH was great, and he sat back. He was very disciplined, most importantly. And I think Todd calls him the closer, right, in the group chat all the time, and he did that job today well.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I want to go in depth a little bit more on these two second half goals, because they were, I thought, really, really good goals. And Caroline, you mentioned, like, it's interesting that the two goals that put us ahead for good came from defenders. And that is something that I feel like saw a little bit more of earlier in the season. We saw like Romero score a couple of goals. Van de Ven scored his goal earlier in the season. We saw a little bit more out of both Porro and Udogie, although I think this was Porro's first Premier League goal of the season today. But we saw a little bit more production out of those guys earlier in the season. To me, a lot of what made the Van de Ven goal special was Son creating the space for him, just to the side. And obviously Van de Ven makes the run up into the box and has the space. You don't expect a center back to come up into that spot and rip an absolute firecracker of a goal in the way that he did. But Sonny created the space for him, did a little step over, got the ball out to him, I thought it was really well done by Son to create that space, but then just Mickey Van de Ven. I mean, what else can you friggin' say about this guy? Man of the match again for me today. He is every bit as good of a defender as I have seen play at this club. And I know that sounds hyperbolic saying that because he's only been here a short time, but when he defends, it's so much. We've made all the comparisons. Like he runs like a gazelle. He looks a little bit like a giraffe sometimes with his size and running ability and just the ability to track guys down, shield them off from the ball, go to ground only when absolutely necessary. Not something he does very often, but then to be able to step up and have a hit at goal like he did today and give this team a lead. Caroline, I don't know what else there is. What other words can we come up with for this guy? He's been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that he looks a little gangly at times, but then he does so many things with such like perfect finesse and technique, like his shot for this goal. Incredible. Didn't know he had that in him. But also, you know, when it comes to like the timing of his tackles, and he's, like you said, I think a contender for player of the season for Spurs. And I know they said this was his first goal at the home stadium, which is really special. And I think it's just nice to see a player like him who not only is obviously objectively very talented, but also appears to really just be happy to be playing for our club. You know, just I think seeing the joy on his face like made it even sweeter. And also good to see Porro get his first goal of the season because he's had quite a few assists, but hadn't been able to, you know, get onto the score sheet himself. And he's one of those who does take the speculative shots a lot, you know, that we were talking about. He does not hesitate to shoot, which I think is, you know, it can be frustrating, but when they go in, they're usually like pretty spectacular goals. So I always enjoy seeing him score. And, you know, like you said earlier in the season, we were getting a few more goals out of the defense. So it's good to see them sort of getting involved again. And I think that's what we need to see, you know, because we know that in our new system, we're not relying on just one player like we used to do with Harry Kane. Like it has to be a team effort. So it's good to see that coming back.
Yeah, Porro did score in the FA Cup game against Burnley, but that was his first Premier League goal of the season. And that what I really loved about the Porro goal, Scott, was actually the assist. Rodrigo Bentancur gets the ball on his head there and kind of sees out to his right that there are multiple players lined up in the box and ready to receive a pass. And honestly, he just kind of flicks it with his head, and it's a little bit speculative, but he knows there are white shirts over there, and Porro got on the end of it and ripped it into the net. And it was like the assist for me, the shot, great. Goal scorers get all the glory. I get it. But those two assists, both from Son and from Bentancur, were picture perfect to me. And that's the kind of production I feel like out of the middle of the pitch. Like those were not things that were coming from the wings. Those were coming from the middle area of the pitch around the box. Those are the kinds of things we've been missing in recent weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, we shot the ball, right? In both of those instances, we shot, and we've talked about that quite a bit in this episode. I think there's past moments where Porro settles that ball and looks to chip it back to across to the far post, right? I think with the different message from the manager and maybe a little less confidence, you don't swing your foot at that. Great finish. Like you said, Bentancur, the pass is speculative, the flick on, but it's also 100% the right option. You also have like less than a second to make that decision. And there's so many players that close to goal who would have just tried to put it somewhere on frame, right? But he had the presence of mind to flick it on, and Porro just smashed it. I think what I'm seeing about these two goals today and just guys like Porro and Van de Ven, which Van de Ven deserves a shout out too, that he was mentioned in the press conference we already covered, right? Saying he was an example of the type of player that Ange wants at Spurs, somebody who wants to come fight and win something here, right? And when I look
we're going to come on to that, by the way. Yes, big time.
Oh, sorry,
we're going to talk. We haven't gotten that, but we are going to talk about that at length. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we shout out Van de Ven for being the name that's mentioned to to give, some sort of semblance to Ange's persona of who you want at Tottenham, right? So he deserves a lot of credit. But when I look at the Porro goal, the Van de Ven goal, the Bentancur decision, guys like those three, like, they're bad dudes, right? And that's what I really like about this group is they're scrappy. Like Pedro Porro made some super unnecessary comment about if you put him in a prison, he'll run the prison shortly after you put him in the prison, right? So super unnecessary. But I think that the point is that he considers himself to be a pretty scrappy guy, right? And Van de Ven for sure is, without a doubt. Van de Ven reminds me of, honestly, he hasn't accomplished what Jan Vertonghen has from a career perspective, but he has an opportunity to. And he's like a stronger, longer version of Jan Vertonghen, in my opinion, right? Just an absolute machine. I also think it's worth mentioning, again, I'm ranting way off pace here, but when you look at Van de Ven and Romero, I mean, they rival Jan and Toby already, in my opinion. Van de Ven is just an absolute gem of a signing. None of us had any clue that this guy was this good, right? We couldn't lie and say we did. And Romero's won a World Cup, right? Starting and has lifted a World Cup. So we've got a really, really nasty center back pairing. I didn't even mention Romero when I said bad dudes, right? He's certainly up on that list, but these are all just guys who are willing to fight for Ange. And I think to take it all back to the 2 goals today, I think those are just moments where we see that is happening and it's the truth.
We are going to move into kind of some news and notes, but this result is not only big because it's a 3 points, but I have kind of blinked and realized that there are only 7 matches left in the season. Like there's not a lot of runway here to hold on to this 4th spot. And this victory over Nottingham Forest does officially put Spurs into 4th position over top of Aston Villa this week. And both teams on 60 points. Spurs have the 3 goals better in goal differential at this point. They also have the game in hand still. So it really is an advantage for Spurs right now to hold on to 4th. And as we all know, 5th is likely to get Champions League this season as well. But to guarantee it, you want to get 4th. And that is where Spurs kind of are. And we heard from Ange at the top. He doesn't want to talk about the top 4. He spoke at length about in his pre-match press conference about how he doesn't really want to talk about top 4. It's not about Champions League qualification. It's not about that. It's about building a program and building a whole thing together. As we do kind of move into like other stuff from the week and not talking specifically about the games, this is going to be a segment that has a working title, but it's going to be, I think we're going to call it like Ange said or Ange quotes or something. I want to hear from Ange because I think the one thing that we all love is at this point in our Spurs fandom and at this point in Ange's tenure is hearing from Ange. Ange went a little bit viral earlier this week in his pre-match press conference talking about Champions League. And he was specifically kind of asked about whether or not getting into the Champions League next season will help in recruitment this summer. Let's hear from Ange and react to it.
Yeah, I don't want those players because they don't want to come to Tottenham. They want to go to a Champions League club. I signed Mickey van der Veen this year. He's not a bad player, is he? We were in the Champions League? No. I don't want those players. That's a beautiful discussion for me to have. That's one of the discussions I have. Why do you want to come to Tottenham? Because if you want Champions League football and that's all you want, you don't want to come to Tottenham. You just want to go to a Champions League club. I want people who want to come to Tottenham who know this club, know the challenge we've got, and we do have a challenge. We're different to other clubs in that we haven't had success for a while. So I'm looking for a certain type of character who's going to say, you know what, they're not in Champions League, but you know what, if I win something with them, that could mean something to my career and to me. So, yeah, I'm up for that fight. So that's part of the discussion. I don't think that makes a difference to me in terms of the players. We've had 2 windows so far, and I haven't had an issue bringing the players I want to this club, even though we're not in Champions League.
There are so many parts of that quote and that minute that I want to like double click on. And Caroline, you just did it, like chef's kiss. Like, number one, you never would have heard a quote like that out of any of our previous 3 managers. Number 2, the idea of wanting to come to Spurs because it's hard, because it's a challenge. And on top of that, the idea that coming to Spurs is different and a challenge because we recognize that it's been so long since this club has won something. Ange is not afraid to say it. He's not afraid to spell out how difficult this job is. It's not like something he didn't know when he took the role. And the types of players he wants are the ones that are up for that. He doesn't want players in his dressing room that are just here because they want to be on the biggest stage. And look, I think the other really important part of the whole Champions League discussion and recruitment is secretly just being in the Premier League is kind of good enough these days. Like being in the Premier League is what a lot of players are after, not only because of the wages that can be paid, but the exposure as well. It's just as lucrative for players to be playing in the Premier League almost as it is in the Champions League. And I know that sounds like a pretty outlandish statement to those who don't, who aren't really paying attention, but I genuinely believe that. I think a player for Nottingham Forest or for West Ham or for Newcastle or any of these other teams that aren't quote unquote the big teams. And I guess Newcastle has kind of moved into that category just from a financial standpoint, but we all know why that is. I think that the exposure playing in the Premier League is just as good, if not better, than playing in the Champions League. And I think Ange knows that. And I think he knows that, he wants guys that want the challenge and want to have to work for it. Caroline, I've been ranting long enough about this. Pick it up from here. What do you have to say about Ange and his thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything you said. And I think it just shows the type of player we're trying to recruit is someone who actually is motivated by challenge and doesn't just want to join a team that is already a title challenger. Like they're already ready to win those trophies. Like they want it to be like a project that they're actually a part of and contribute to so that they can feel like they helped to help the club get to that next level. And, Mickey Van de Ven is a great example of that because he's a very, talented young player who probably could have gone to a lot of clubs in this league and done, perfectly well. But he chose to come to Tottenham because it's a space where, he can have a starting role, but it's also going to be challenging for him and he's going to have to work hard. And I think that's the type of player that we're starting to recruit are those really hard workers. And I also think there's this kind of perception that, footballers also will just go where the money is and they don't always care about where the money's coming from. But I genuinely think there are some players out there who are not going to feel good about joining a team like a City or a Newcastle, for example. They want to come to a club like Tottenham where they can feel like it is being kind of built from the ground up. And they don't have to feel like, like they took the easy route to a trophy, essentially. So yeah, I loved everything that Ange said in that clip, and I think we can feel good about having him at the head of our recruitment strategy and bringing in players who we can really get behind as fans too. Like I think that's a huge thing for me is that I feel good about supporting these players.
Scott, could you love Ange anymore at this point? Like what else could he say that would send it even further?
Yeah. Not only would I run through a brick wall, to use the much overused euphemism, right, for that man. I think the biggest takeaway from that whole 45 seconds or whatever it is for me is that in this day and age, as you both just alluded to, players follow a lot more than minutes, a lot more than trophies, a lot more than even opportunity, right? You've got, well, to use West Ham, for example, you've got Paquetá and Kudus who went to West Ham, right? You've got players like Nuno Mendes at Wolves who starts for Portugal. There's just a lot of people who are willing to come finish somewhere between, 15th and 9th in the Premier League and make a really good living doing it. Then you have an Ange Postecoglou who, when asked those types of questions, 99 out of 100 managers, as you mentioned earlier, Andrew, 3 of them being at Spurs, are going to say something along the lines of, that's just the world we live in. You can't really find those types of players who are just in it for the heart anymore, blah, blah, blah. Ange Postecoglou is the type of guy who says, well, why not? When other managers want to say hypothetically, like it just doesn't work that way anymore, blah, blah, blah. Ange says, well, why don't we find a way to make that happen? I'm going to stick to my principles and we're going to make it work. And you just don't see that from very many people anymore, anywhere across more than just sports, right? People who want to dream and want to challenge the way that things are supposed to work, right? And do it because they're passionate about it and want to stick to their principles, I think is really special. And we have a phenomenal manager. I used to give Dakota so much shit when he said we need to go after this Ange Postecoglou guy, and I'm blah blah blah. Hipster manager is what I called Ange a bunch of times to Dakota. So I have a lot of crow to eat because we have an extremely special manager at Spurs. One who I truly believe will actually win something at Tottenham, right? I really think he will.
I also want to add too that I think Ange's decision to make Son captain really kind of telegraphs this intent of his to build a squad of players who are not just mercenaries. Like, there is value in loyalty. There is value in, players who are good people at the end of the day and who are actually going to enjoy playing with each other for that reason. So yeah, it does feel like there are just very good vibes around the squad at the moment, and we can only go up from here.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. The culture that Ange is building, we hit the reset button from a culture perspective, right? When Kane, in my opinion, when Kane walked out the door, everything reset. And Ange's culture is visible in every one of those guys I mentioned earlier. Bentancur, when Porro scored, Bentancur, it looked like he had just won the World Cup in the box. I mean, he was losing his shit. We just don't see that very often anymore, right? Guys who are so excited to just do the right thing for the cause. It's special. And again, all credit to Ange because his culture is about the team and about, again, doing what is required for the greater good. And then you start to see those types of reactions and you see that it's building, right?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's I don't have words for what this guy's done. I mean, I know that everybody's got their small little quips there, and there are quips. Like we're going to be critical when it's needed to be critical, but I have not heard Ange on the microphone like really take one false step. He always seems to say the right thing, have thoughtful answers for things, and just the idea that being in the Champions League is not the end all be all. It's about building something and growing something and recruiting for the right reasons and not just for, honestly, the financial ones is really important to me. And I think that's really big.
Well, I think his underlying maybe, quiet point that he wants to make too is if you're in it for Champions League, then you do have a limit and a ceiling of comfort, a point of comfortability, a limit, whatever you want to call it, right? He's here to win. He's made that very clear. I'm here to win the Premier League. And if you're a player who's comfortable getting fourth place and that's what you want, then good for you, but you don't have the right mentality for myself and the project at Tottenham, right? And that's what I think is super, super awesome about that more than anything else.
Yeah. And I also think he just recognizes that we can't skip steps either. He's so laser focused on incremental improvements week to week. And that's what he focuses on in all the post-game comments, is saying I feel like we made progress in, certain areas today. And that's really what matters more than the result, in any individual game. It's that we're making progress forward every game, ideally. We know there have been a few games, this season where maybe weren't the best performances.
But that's the incremental thing that you're talking about. Like you can't just quote
smooth road, there will be bumps
nor should
in the road.
Nor should it be. And it's so ironic that for a few seasons we went to the quote unquote mindset of hiring a winner, when in actuality I think we did hire a winner this time. It's going about it in a different way. And I think personally, a smarter way. And while it might take a little bit longer to get where you want to get to, Sometimes that's how it has to be done. So I think that's really, really big. A few other things from the week. We did see financial disclosures released from the club this week. I don't have a whole hell of a lot to say on this. The club did report some pretty big losses, but we all know that they're also reporting some pretty big gains because they are the stadium itself. There was a really big piece on The Athletic this week. It's a lengthy read, but I encourage fans to give that a look about just the stadium and the cash cow that the stadium is, bringing dollars in. Ownership has confirmed that they are potentially looking to sell a stake in the club, not the entirety of the club, but just some things to look out for, things to watch. It could be a nice cash injection. Who knows if they do that, which could obviously be a good thing because we all know that the books, unlike a lot of other teams, Nottingham Forest included apparently, and I know there's some controversy involving Spurs with that, with Brendan Johnson, but Spurs books are in order, and I think we can all be kind of confident about, whatever they want to do financially, they should be able to. But I don't know if either of you have anything else to say about the financial news that was released this week or not, but I know I certainly don't have a lot to add.
The only thing I would add is it's humorous to me in the sense that all we've heard forever is Tottenham spend, like please start spending like a big club, and then financials are released and it's like, Tottenham, what you spent? Like what's going on here, right? I don't think the two match or marry at any point. So, but again, it's just probably the standard football fan at this point in time.
And I think the important thing is just that we're staying within those profit and sustainability rules. So we don't need to be having these moments of panic
Exactly.
like some of the other teams, even within the top 6, are having right now. So yeah, I feel at ease about it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean,
no question.
I think, yeah, you tend to lose before you gain business, right? That's kind of how it works. So yeah, we're, as you both have overemphasized, we are well in order financially, and things will be just fine. And I hope we keep reporting these types of losses because it means we're investing in the squad.
No question about it. The other note from the week, Tuesday against West Ham marked Son's 400th match with Tottenham, which is 16th all time in club history. Some staggering stats that I read. He now has 100 after today's assist, the assist on the Van de Ven goal, 179 goals and assists in the Premier League since the 2015-2016 season when he arrived. That only trails Harry Kane and Mo Salah in that time span, which is absolutely bonkers. He's one spot ahead of Kevin De Bruyne on that list for goals and assists since he arrived. But for some reason is not mentioned in the same vein as those other 3 players that I just mentioned. I just want to throw that out there.
And we all know why.
We do. And it's a word that starts with R and ends with acism, but that's okay. Well, it's not okay, but that's we at least know why it is. We would love for it not to be the case, but I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else there is to say about Heung-min Son that hasn't been said. But we'll just continue to say all of these things because they're important to say. He's incredible, and he's a Premier League legend.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just something that's really struck me as everyone's been sort of celebrating this milestone for him is how many fans cite him as their entry to loving the club, which is definitely the case for me as well. So, he is a club legend. He already is, no matter what he does in the rest of his career. And I think we all just, owe him a big debt of gratitude.
Yeah, we just need to find a trophy before he retires because it would be beyond poetic for Sonny to be the first captain to lift the trophy, since the last League Cup. And
it would mean so much more than he who shall not be named winning a trophy at the club, which will also not be named and isn't going to win a trophy this year. But anyway.
No, not this season. You wouldn't think so unless they somehow have a magical Champions League run. Look, I'll name them. For those who don't know, we're talking about Bayern Munich and Harry Kane, of course. But Caroline doesn't want to say it because her heart is hurting.
Because I'm in pain.
Yes. Next on my list, the Chelsea match finally has a date, which is exactly where we all thought it would go. It has been rescheduled for Thursday, May 2nd, which sits right in between fixtures against Arsenal and Liverpool. We still don't have a date yet for the City match. That will probably, I don't know, they'll probably play that like a day after the Arsenal game just to screw us. I don't know. The schedule, the fixture list coming up, I mentioned earlier, it's only 7 games. It's a trip to St. James this week to face Newcastle on Saturday. Then it's weirdly going to be one of those, that next was supposed to be the City match, but they're playing the same day in the FA Cup semifinal against Chelsea on the 20th of April, so that match won't happen. So after Newcastle, it's essentially a more than 2-week break before the next North London derby, which is a home match on the 28th. Then that Chelsea match on the Thursday. Then the following trip to Anfield on the Sunday. And then there's only 2 other matches on the docket after that. May 11th against Burnley and Sunday, May 19th is the final day of the season against Sheffield United. They still got to fit that City match in there somewhere, the home fixture. So not a lot of games left, but not a lot of dates on the calendar to fit them in either. I know a lot of fans were upset about where this Chelsea match was placed on the schedule. To me, I think this team has the ability and the depth to get by playing 3 games in a week. They haven't been doing it a lot this season. I think they'll be fine, but were you guys overly upset by this decision by the league this week?
No, just because I kind of, and this is very negative me, but I feel like we're not going to win that Liverpool game, whether it's the universe intervening or the officials intervening. I just feel like it's kind of written in the stars that we're not going to be allowed to win that game because of what happened in the reverse fixture. So I'm like, you know what? It's okay. As long as we focus on beating Arsenal, beating Chelsea, that game is whatever to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all probably assumed at this point that it was going to be plunked in between 2 weekend games, or create some sort of 3 games in a week situation. Like you both have already said, we haven't played in any other competitions for quite some time, right? So the Premier League is all we've had, and I think we probably should be able to handle it at this point if we want to consider ourselves a serious club. But I think the run-in itself, I know there's a lot of fans who are a little bit concerned, right? We know 5th place is Champions League at this point, which does definitely add some comfortability to this entire situation, right? But I think this run-in isn't as unfavorable as people think. We talked a lot about it in our group chat, but they had put out, the data around a Premier League top 6 mini table. And on that mini table, we have the equal best points per game haul of any of the top 6 clubs, right? I think we've taken 7 points from 3 matches on that table. And it's favorable for us. So I'm not sitting here shaking in my boots. I think if you look at Arsenal, if you look at City, if you look at Liverpool, if we can find 4 points from those 3 games, I think that's then we've done swimmingly is what I'm trying to say over here, right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
I think that should really be our goal. Now, we would never say that in the press, right? But if I'm in, that's the message I'm drilling into the team is like, we got to strategically find 4 points from these 3 matches, and we'll be in really good shape because I suspect we'll show up to play in those other matches against Newcastle, and I think we play Sheffield, and I think we play Burnley. So every reason to think we'll go and get 4th place. And if for some reason we stumble because we have a tough fixture list, 5th place seems to be pretty comfortable for a Champions League position. And to wrap that whole thing up, Ange doesn't really seem to care if we get Champions League anyways, right? Of course, he knows it's important, and I don't mean to say that he disregards it, but bigger things are at play here than scraping into 5th place, which makes me think we'll be fully focused on finishing as high as humanly possible, even if that's 3rd, right? And that leads to us showing up and doing a good job through this run, and I believe.
Well, and Caroline, you mentioned earlier, like, yeah, we're probably not going to win the Liverpool match because there might be some payback there. Well, guess what? I feel the same exact way about Chelsea, and I know that match is at Stamford Bridge, but Chelsea freaking stink. I mean, they just dropped points this morning to Sheffield United, giving up a goal in stoppage time, and I know they had their little moment against Manchester United earlier in the week, and everybody was, I actually saw people saying earlier this week that was the best comeback that a Mauricio Pochettino team ever had, which I really thought was funny considering, a night in Amsterdam from a few years ago. But gosh, it just made me really, really tickled me. But I think Chelsea flat out freaking stink, and I think we can beat the hell out of them. I don't care if it's on the road or not. So bring them on. Like, let's go. I don't care. We can play them on a Thursday, a Saturday. It doesn't matter to me.
And I feel the same way about starting this, run in with Newcastle, because I don't think they're the team that they were, even, maybe at the beginning of the season. They've had a lot of injury issues. So I guess we do have to kind of acknowledge that. But they've been so up and down. So that's not a team that I fear the way I did when I was looking at the schedule at the beginning of the season. You know what I mean?
I hear you also, but I also have the last trip to St. James Park stuck in my head, which is not something I want to have stuck in my head.
That was a whole different time when we had just the Conte
Yeah, no, you're right.
Cloud hanging over everything. So yeah, I don't think it's quite.
It's true. It's true, but it will be a fun run in.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on all of this is it's an opportunity to double click on Johnson and Werner and how good they've been as a tandem on the wings, right? Is we're playing a lot of teams in this run in who are going to get forward against us, and I'm pretty excited to see Werner and Johnson feast on that space that we're going to be afforded. I hate saying it. I don't suspect Kulu wins his place back, maybe for the rest of the season, right? And that man's a grinder, and I suspect he'll come on strong next season. But right now, Johnson and Werner are where everything's coming from, and they're both looking really good. And when Liverpool and Chelsea are flying forward against us, we've also got those two who are going to be ready to fly forward right back at them. And as we've talked about a lot, teams that want to give us that space, we're pretty dangerous, right? And it's maybe why we have such a favorable results haul in that mini six table, right? Is because of that exact reason there. So I'm excited to see those two who have been phenomenal eat up some of that space coming up.
No question about it. It should be fun to watch. I mentioned earlier that Chelsea blew their game against Sheffield United this morning. That was something that our good friend Dakota got to see because he went out to Nashville for the Premier League Fan Fest that was held. NBC Sports puts these on. I think they do 2 a year, or they do at least like one a season. I think they do 1 or 2 a season. But Dakota was in Nashville this morning, and he wanted to check in on the pod. Let's hear from Dakota and react.
What's going on, Tottenham Depot listeners? This is Dakota reporting live from Nashville, Tennessee, where I just left Premier League Fan Fest. And let me tell you, it was a great time. Part of what made it a great time was me and about 100 other Spurs fans got to watch a 3-1 victory over Nottingham Forest to put us back into that coveted 4th spot in the Premier League table. And it was made even a little bit more sweet because we got to watch it right next to some Chelsea fans who had their win taken away in stoppage time. So they drew to keep them well below anything that's meaningful in the Premier League table, which is where they belong. On Saturday, it was a wonderful experience. Woke up super early. And by super early, I also mean super late. It was about 2:30 in the morning to head down to the riverfront to make sure I was in line to be there when everything got started. So got to experience the broadcast. Was there front row, right behind Rebecca Lowe and Tim Howard and both Robbies and all of their guests that they had on Saturday morning. It was a great time, a great energy, lots of fun things going on with some fellow Premier League fans. In the afternoon on Saturday, Nashville Spurs very graciously put on an event that the club collaborated with them on to bring our club legend Ledley King over, and I can confirm he's the nicest human on the planet. He sat there with us for about an hour and a half doing a Q&A, and then made sure to stick around so everybody got to shake his hand, and he signed everything that was brought up to him and take pictures with everyone. So if you've got the chance to go to Premier League Fan Fest, wherever they may go next year, do it. However, I've got to tell you, Nashville set the record for most attendance over the 2 days, and I'm not sure that anyone's going to come close. But do your part. Make sure that you can go. It's a wonderful time. And let's keep supporting Spurs for the rest of the year. And it's just the start. Ange Postacoglu is cooking something delicious for us.
So that's Dakota checking in from Nashville this morning. We definitely saw him on the broadcast a few times, which was cool as well. He was right down there in front, giving everybody a look at. There were a ton of Spurs fans. It was really cool to see. Shout out to the folks at Nashville Spurs, and for those of you watching on YouTube, yes, there is Dakota and Ledley King. A little selfie that he grabbed kind of as he was departing today. So he looked like he had a great time. All the fans that were there looked like they had a great time, and it was really cool to see, Scott.
The man said he woke up at 2:30 in the morning, and that is a brave man when knowing there's a decent chance you go watch a 2-2 draw. So I have to give him a lot of credit for getting up and doing that. I think it's awesome. I'm jealous, and I think that's probably why we got 3 points today. So massive shout to Dakota for taking one for the team and waking up at 2:30.
Well, and Ledley King, was like euphoric in his praise for all the American fans who come out, the American Spurs fans. Obviously, like there are a ton of Spurs fans here in the US, and we've talked about that at length. And they're one of the fastest growing clubs, not just in the world, but specifically here. And that shows when you get such a well-attended event like this in Nashville, which is obviously a super soccer crazy city as well. So it was really cool to see.
Yeah, and worth one time shouting out Nashville Spurs too, who do just an amazing job as an organization. Sorry to cut you off, Caroline, but they are just they are really something special. What they did back, was it 2017, 18-ish, right, when Spurs came stateside, and it
was around then, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But I was fortunate to be there, and Nashville Spurs really put on an event for us Spurs fans, and it looked like they did the same thing again this weekend for the Fan Fest. So credit to the team down there for sure.
Yeah, I went to the Fan Fest that was in Austin a couple of years ago, and it really is a fun time. And I think it does kind of make you realize how different it is being a supporter of a Premier League team over here, because we can coexist with the other club's fans. And I know when I was at that Fan Fest, we were playing Liverpool that day, and I had a Chelsea fan next to me who was, rooting for Spurs actively. So strange things can happen at these Fan Fests, but it is a good time. And, I think it's just great to be like in such a, spirited community. You don't always get that, when you're just watching from home. So good times.
I also just want to shout out the club for having Ledley King come over and be a part of it too, because I think that's really cool and just a really nice touch. Obviously, he does these kinds of things all the time. He's been a club ambassador for quite some time, but it is really cool to have the club realize how important these types of events are, not only in celebrating fans that are coming out, but creating new ones as well. It's how you grow the game. It's how you expand your reach, and it's something that Spurs are obviously quite damn good at. So kudos to them for making that happen too. It's a really big thing.
Yeah, he had come out to the when Spurs women had their sort of international tour a couple of summers ago.
Yeah, the preseason one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like this is when those kind of regional local supporter clubs really get a chance to shine and welcome people in. And I felt like Louisville Spurs did a great job of hosting everybody that weekend. So yeah, it's really nice to be part of those events.
Well, I think you've created the transition for me perfectly. You mentioned Spurs women. That's the next thing to talk about on the docket here. And it feels a little weird. We haven't talked a lot about the women in recent weeks just because they haven't played a damn game since the 24th of March. And they didn't play this weekend, but on the horizon is this big FA Cup semifinal next Sunday at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, Leicester City. I know the three of us are amped, but how do we think this is actually going to go? Like there's for those of you listening that aren't aware of this, like Spurs are playing in an FA Cup semifinal at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium next Sunday. I think everybody should be jacked about this. It's going to be a really, really cool experience, but how confident are we about this match, Caroline?
Nervous, but I think confident, just because it feels like we really have momentum on our side, which probably sounds stupid after we just talked about how we haven't had a game in 2 weeks. But I think just in terms of like fan enthusiasm, it's just been really great to see everybody talking about this game coming up, planning to get there to the stadium to watch. I know I've seen lots of photos on Twitter of the advertisements that the club has put up sort of around the city. So I feel like we're going to have a pretty good crowd. And, we've beat Leicester in the stadium before. I feel like, there's some precedent there. We also were able to get a win against them a few weeks ago in actual league play. So and we also have some players who are coming back to fitness. Martha, they were showing, was back in training. Beth is looking better every week. So I just feel like this is our chance to get to our first ever final, and it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, in the absence of games, Leicester have played a game actually since Spurs last did. They played on the 30th. Now there's been an international break this week, so no one's playing. But Leicester did get a 2-2 draw with Aston Villa on March 30th. So they have had a match since then, but they also lost their other match since playing Spurs. They lost a home game to Brighton, which is not a good showing. So maybe form is something to be in favor of Spurs here, but it's a cup semifinal. Like, anything can happen. So, Scott, how are you feeling confidence-wise about Spurs women going into next week's big clash with Leicester?
Like Caroline, I'm nervous, but I'm confident as well. And the nerves only come from it being a cup semifinal, right? There's no way you're going into it without them. But I look at what we've been leaning on lately, and as much as we've talked about how the men cannot progress the ball through the middle, the women are carving through the middle like a hot knife through butter. It's been great to see, and I just had to laugh at myself for saying that, right? It came off the tongue, but no, we've been, we've really been good through the middle. I've been impressed, and as we've talked about, credit to Robert, but I think we have everything in our locker to go and beat Leicester City handily in this match. If we go and just play nice, calm, relaxed soccer like we have been, I don't see Leicester having enough to beat us. And it feels good to say that. I really think we'll be ready. Most importantly, I think it's our spine that makes me maybe so confident too. I think Becky's been phenomenal between the posts. She is the stamped on starter. I think we've talked about it already. James Turner's been really good in the middle, and I think she's been a big piece of why we've been so stable and able to really control the tempo of games. And with all signs pointing to Bethany England starting and being in form in that match too, I really think like we'll have too much for Leicester, and it feels good to say that.
I would also add that quite a few of our players have scored during international break, including Luana Buller, who doesn't, normally score goals. So that feels like a good sign to me. And actually, Roz scored a very important goal for Morocco to put them ahead in their, two-legged tie to try to get Olympic qualification over Zambia. So yeah, some huge goals being scored. So that feels good.
Yeah, no question about it. It should be fun. I'm gonna have to watch it on delay, but I will be checking that match out for sure. I'll be watching everything on delay next weekend, which leads me to close the pod by telling the listeners that we are going to be coming to you a day later next week. We are going to be recording our pod on Monday instead of our normal Sunday. Just a little bit of travel for me involved, so I'll be catching up on things, and we're going to get a pod out to you guys Monday instead of Sunday next week. So be on the lookout for that. We'll recap the men against Newcastle, big trip up there. And then, of course, the women playing in that FA Cup semifinal, which would be so freaking awesome to win. Like, that would be so monumental. Could you imagine if the women bring the first trophy to this club in so many years? Like, that would really be something. I would love to see there will be plenty of banter, and I will take all of it because it would be just so freaking cool. I want to see it happen. It would be badass to me, but you got to win the semi before you can win the finals. So hopefully they can go and do that. This has been a fun one. Scott, Caroline, thank you for jumping on and We had a lot to chat about, and obviously we filled up a little more than an hour here talking about it. It was a busy week, and I'm sure this one will be much of the same. We'll be back with you next week to talk about it all. Be sure to follow us at Tottenham Depot on all your social media platforms, and check out our YouTube page. If you haven't been, we've been streaming all these podcasts in recent weeks live. They live up on the YouTube page there for you to watch them and look at our goofy faces as we kind of meander through this weird football club that we all love so much. So until next week, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.